Okay, hello everyone to another episode of the Better Product Solutions podcast. Happy to be bringing Dave Liebl from Intricon. He's the Chief Technology Officer there. Dave and I talk about really future of wearable sensors in healthcare with regards to trends, the core technologies that are considered for wearable sensors, the role of a CDMO, contract development manufacturing organization, in helping commercialize wearable sensors, as well as kind of investment priorities and strategies of kind of where to put the money to bring one of these wearables to market. So without further ado, bringing you Dave Liebl from Intricon. Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody to the next episode of the Better Product Solutions podcast. Happy to bring Dave Liebl. He's the Chief Technology Officer from Intricon here on the podcast. I'll let Dave introduce himself in a minute here. I met Dave at a trade show last year,
Yep,
and
correct.
so we've had a chance to kind of get to know each other, and it's been great getting to know Dave. So, Dave, the softball question: you can introduce yourself and your role at Intricon, and if you want, talk about anything you want in terms of Intricon.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Steve. I really appreciate the chance to be with you on your podcast. So, Dave Liebl. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Intricon. I've been in the medical device business for over 30 years of my career. Started primarily in the technical areas, and then graduated into more commercial, as well as overall leadership of businesses. So it's been a really fun industry, and it's been a fun career. Intricon is a medical device manufacturer. We do contract manufacturing for large OEMs, and our specialty areas are more in the areas of high-density microelectronic biosensors and electromagnetic sensing types of technologies used for surgical navigation in the body. And we also do some of our own devices in the hearing health space. So we are steeped in design and regulatory expertise, and certainly are keen on understanding the end markets that we participate in to make sure, like we all want to do, is add as much value to our customers as possible by understanding the world they live in. So, again, it's great to be with you on your podcast today, Steve.
Yeah, and I met, as I said, I met you. I remember you gave a great presentation at the Semicon Flex conference, and then we met after that presentation. We were both speaking. I was speaking on workforce, and you were speaking on a lot of what you guys are doing in this space. And I guess most of my questions on this podcast are going to be around wearables. So the adoption of wearables and trends. So, I mean, and you wrote a great article that I read that was posted through your social media platform on Intricon, by the way. And so what trends are driving the desire for wearables? Because it's like a wearable is not a wearable. People have different kind of definitions of what wearables are, but maybe start with kind of what your version of wearables in terms of what Intricon's been focused on and what those trends that are driving all of this desire.
Yeah, so our technology set is primarily advantageous for things like biosensor, wearable biosensors. We've been doing wearables at Intricon for over 40 years. We started out as a hearing health company, and essentially that's a wearable biosensor in many ways. And the trends that we see, there's been this long desire for preventive medicine that's been in the industry as long as I've been a part of it, but it's been hard to realize. And I think what's happening is now with the advent of wearable types of devices, battery power options for recharging, wireless communication, it's opened the door for not just points in time data from a medical professional standpoint, because I can go and get my blood pressure taken, and it may be very different in 2 hours and 2 hours after that. And I think what the wearables are doing is helping the medical profession realize, look, there is a lot of value in gathering data over time. Plus, consumers are more comfortable with wearables, whether it be AirPods or Apple Watches or whatever it may be. So the trend is growing, and the pandemic even accelerated it further because then telemedicine became almost a necessity. So we're excited about the wearable space just because a trend that was already occurring is accelerated, and we think we have a technology set, and certainly it's one of the reasons that you and I have built, I think, a nice start to a partnership here. In what you do and what we do complements each other well in terms of wearable types of devices, which I think is the future of medicine because it makes preventive medicine actually possible, more so than in the past.
I know it's funny too, because I get my annual physical. It's usually right around Christmas. Every December, I get my annual physical, right? But it's like, you get the blood work, and then it's like, okay, a year from now, we'll see where, we'll kind of see where it's at. And I think people are realizing, like, I think it was Peter Diamandis in his podcast that I listened to, and he said, like, don't die stupid. He says, like, just don't die stupid. And he defined not dying stupid of just this lack of continuous monitoring and having a big surprise. It's like, oh, well, at my next annual.
Mhm.
And so I think people are definitely realizing, hey, with technology, why are we waiting at such long cycles, right?
Exactly, because there's ways to do this, and we're working on a number of things. One example is we're working on a device that is looking for volatile organics in breath, and literally from volatile organics in breath, you can determine not just lung disease but other diseases. And so my view, and I think the view of us at Intricon generally is that the primary care physician and the point of care and those physicals are going to change over the next 5 to 10 years, and they're going to have all sorts of screening tools to ask, okay, let's check your breath, let's check a number of other kind of parameters where disease typically shows up, and you can anticipate that disease. And sometimes those are screening tools just to say, you know what, there may be something here. You should go get a more invasive or a more detailed scan. That's how I think medicine has to happen, because discovery of disease early is far easier to treat, which means a lot less cost to the system, which is what has to happen in, not only the U.S. but worldwide. So.
But also the healthcare system kind of gets in its own way too. And I always get confused with these CPT code type reimbursement stuff. Can you speak to, I mean, where maybe what's changing in that landscape that is maybe reducing some obstacles and allowing wearables to maybe get through the new product introduction process of a brand owner team or an emerging startup that has a technology?
Yeah, and yeah. So, CMS, which is a U.S. government agency, they create these CPT codes, and that's how all fee for service is paid for. If there's not a CPT code for it, hospitals probably aren't going to do the procedure unless the patient pays for it. What's changing though is you're seeing, and pharma's been doing this for the last 5 or 10 years. You're seeing consumer advertising of pharma. So basically, hey, go ask your doctor about this medication. And so you're basically creating a demand from the consumer to go to their physicians and ask for these things. And that is also starting to occur in some of the over-the-counter things that are happening with devices. So hearing aids, for instance, you can now get over-the-counter based on legislation in the U.S. You just saw, I think, in the last couple of weeks, Dexcom just announced an over-the-counter glucose monitor. So all these companies are starting to bring over-the-counter solutions, and that is going to drive CMS to do things more quickly. Another thing that is happening is that you're seeing clinical studies being done with wearables in anticipation and trying to predict hospitalizations for chronic disease or just anticipation of disease generally. And as those clinical studies are done that are recognized by the medical community, that is going to force CMS to act more quickly, because again, consumers are going to demand it. If they see that, oh, I can learn about disease early and have a better survival rate or a better life, the consumers will drive change more quickly.
And of course, none of this works without the technology in the sensor itself. So can you speak to kind of what are some of the core technologies and elements inside, these wearable sensors that are getting such attention?
Yeah, we kind of classify them into sort of five primary, let's say, containers. When you think about a wearable biosensor, there's the sensing element, there's the processing. Something has to process what was sent or being sensed. Then that has to be communicated to someone or in a certain fashion. And then there has to be something that's holding this whole thing together, which is a chassis. And then the final piece is the data itself, which is where most of our customers see the most value, is that AI and data and cloud and communications with electronic health records. That's the real magic, because that data is going to give them a lot of credibility to help anticipate disease in different ways. So the technologies we see in sensors are widely varied. There's optical sensors, ultrasonic sensors. There's microfluidic sensors where there's micro needles that are going into the interstitial space to look at interstitial fluid. That's how lots of CGM is starting to migrate towards those ideas. So there's a variety of technologies there that from silicone wafer-based technology to true needles to LEDs that are used in a unique way. The processing itself is where the electronics come, and that's where, Tapecon has got a great capability in terms of printed electronics. The stick-to-skin element is part of the chassis, but the electronics piece, if you need more durability, you might want to go with a hard or a semi-rigid board. But if you need something disposable, a printed flexible electronics is exactly what's needed. And there, you're dealing with mostly standard electronic components, with the exception of the microprocessor. And so that's an area that we also are kind of staying abreast of, is as microprocessor technologies get more powerful, more targeted, and then you see certain things like ASICs coming out. I just heard this morning from a colleague about an ASIC that is using AI to mask noise for hearing health, which is one of the biggest issues around people who wear hearing aids. They don't like to be in crowds. Well, this is essentially a learning algorithm that gets updated and is showing promise to actually make hearing aids viable. So these are the technologies we watch there. And then on the communication sides of things, Bluetooth low energy, Wi-Fi, near field communication, but there's a whole bunch of new protocols for low power data communication that are coming out. One interesting one I saw just the other day was called Nike Plus. I don't know much about it yet, but there's Zigbee, Nike Plus. There's all these different communication technologies. And then finally, is of course, is the chassis. As new adhesives come out that are more friendly to people's skin, but then just the making sure you have a chassis that's durable based on the wearing life and the intent of the use of the device. So we're watching all of these technologies to see what's emerging and what could be disruptive in terms of, especially AI these days, is a big thing to watch. So.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, for both of our organizations, like a really exciting time. I mean, you laid out these five kind of primary buckets, but it's like the devil's in the details. There's so much detail depending on what someone, I'll say, because of course this podcast is primarily for a brand owner team looking to, launch or improve a device, right? All the detailed kind of all the details, of what they're trying to do, and then how the product has to realize itself. Because even in the category, like when I think of the power side of it, some of the trade shows that we've attended and some of the speeches I've heard, it seems like power is a real issue. I mean, in terms of it being on the bill of material, the largest expense and really a major factor in how the device can work, and power management being like a really difficult challenge to overcome. I mean, you hear about people trying to energy harvest and trying to use this,
Mhm.
battery free. I mean, obviously your organization is all over thinking about all of those factors, but I mean, how do you see power management as kind of being figured out, or do you think there's still a lot of challenges to the power management side of these devices?
I think it's an evolution that is occurring and will continue to occur. And frankly, it's escalating. There's more battery startup things going on than, at least in my memory. We've run across an enzyme-based battery that literally is paper. So it's essentially a paper battery that has enzymes that can create power, and it's in a way such that one of the bigger problems with like shelf life of these devices is that you'll charge them and send them out to the field. Well, then that charge is going to dissipate a bit, depending on when the product is purchased, et cetera. Well, this enzyme-based battery, you can activate it once you open it. So the enzymes, there's no degradation. Energy harvesting, as you mentioned, a lot of implantable devices are considering things like energy harvest from heartbeat, this more mechanical to power-based. But yeah, we're watching this very closely. I think the other thing, I mean, most of us have smartphones these days. What's one of the biggest things we worry about when your smartphone is 2.5 years old? Oh, am I charge my phone? So battery technology is going to continue to escalate in terms of capacity, its ability to survive longer. So new elements are being discovered and ways to do battery. And then rechargeability is also one of the biggest areas that's being looked at, because how you choose to recharge a battery has a lot to do with its life. So.
Mhm. Right. So much to talk, so much a lot of rabbit holes we could go down there. I'll
Yeah, for
transition.
sure.
Obviously, Intricon identifies as a contract development and manufacturing organization, aka CDMO. So, how does a CDMO support some of the product teams that want to bring either wearable biosensor or any type of wearable sensor for that, wearable biosensors to market? What are some of the things that your team's doing to support them in their launch? And I'm sure it probably varies based on, the maturity of the organization, as far as their funding and just where they are in their development cycle. So how would you answer that?
Yeah, so one of the things we do as a CDMO is we try to make sure we can meet a customer wherever they're at in their development process. So we have done a number of our own products. We do our own regulatory approvals for some of our hearing health products, both in the US and in Europe and around the world. So we understand what it takes to bring a device to life in terms of the stages of development. It's very prescribed and regulated between, ISO, FDA, and other regulatory agencies around the world. So we understand the vocabulary. So we can start and actually run a whole development project on behalf of a customer, or if it's a more sophisticated customer, we can engage in their process, and we again can provide reports and data in a fashion that is going to meet the needs of regulatory bodies around the world. So I think having that foundation really sets us apart from others, because we've heard from several customers in early stage companies like, oh my gosh, our CDMO doesn't know how to do this, and they're counting on us and we don't know how to do it. Well, we can help. And so we try to make sure we're able to engage in whatever fashion the customer is needed, depending on their level of sophistication, where they're at in their process, et cetera. And that's serving us pretty well. I mean, we aren't lacking for opportunities, which is good.
Yeah, but in terms of how they would prioritize these investments, though, it's like, depending on who they are, I guess if it's an earlier stage company, you'd probably rather have them prioritize investments towards, I guess, making sure that there's desirability in the product, the channel, because you can easily spend a lot of time and energy on technical feasibility. But can you speak to, I guess, just some of the, I guess, I don't want to phrase in terms of what advice would you give, because that's almost too broad. But what type of prioritization of investment do you think should be made for someone to get through some of these complexities, to get through the pathway of commercializing a wearable device?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And some of the articles I've been a part of kind of share with this, begin with the end in mind. And there's several key questions to ask right up front before you really even start. And one is, what am I displacing? So if I have this idea, what am I going to displace? And commercially, how am I going to, if this product is real and works, how am I going to displace what's already out there? Because there's a lot of inertia in the healthcare system to not change anything. Docs get trained in medical school and as residents, and they are pretty set on this is the practice they're going to do. So how am I going to displace it, and how is it going to be adopted is one. The other is it reimbursed? If there's not a CPT code or some means of reimbursement in another jurisdiction around the world, you're probably not going to have a product that makes sense unless it's cheap enough where a consumer is willing to buy it. So it's adding so much value, a consumer is willing to spend their own money on it. So that's the second thing. And then the other piece is, what's my commercial pathway? I've run across a lot of young companies who say, oh, I want to hire a direct sales force and we're going to go out and sell it. That's very difficult to do in today's healthcare market. There's probably, the world doesn't need another direct sales force for a medical device, because there's several of them out there that are large, and they can really stop you out even if it's a great product. And direct sales forces are very expensive. So understanding your commercial pathways, the reimbursement model, and then making sure how is this going to displace what's out there. And the fourth piece is cost less. You absolutely have to be able to demonstrate that this technology and what it's going to displace is going to cost less than what the current practice is. And it can't be, 2% less. It has to be 10% or more typically, before, a new modality of treatment is going to be accepted typically.
Well, I mean, obviously that's broad as much as we could cram in on this broad kind of future of wearable sensors in the healthcare umbrella. And as usual in these podcasts, it's like I blink and 20 something minutes go by.
Yeah.
That's all I really had on the list. Is there anything, Dave, that you want to close with, or add any other kind of thoughts that are rolling in your head to say, yeah, I forgot to say something, or is there anything else you want to add, or any closing parting thoughts for those that are listening / watching?
Yeah, I think the only other point I would make is that there is a lot of it. There's a significant trend, because this can be daunting if you want to do a medical device. It is not inexpensive to get a regulatory approval in primary jurisdictions in the world. But begin with the end in mind. If you think this could be a consumer product, well, if you think it's consumer product might be a medical product, start developing that product with the same sort of mindset as you would a medical product. Because the idea is that you can do some basic fast fail kinds of things around the consumer space to see if it's viable. But if you've done those activities the right way, you're going to accelerate the amount of time it takes to turn it into a medical device and certainly reduce cost. So the other point is that screening tools are becoming far more accepted in the consumer space. So in some cases, there may be, I mean, just think of an Apple Watch, right? Before they got their approval for an ECG, it was still measuring ECG. So it wasn't medically recognized as data, but as a consumer, you still had a screening tool that says, oh, something seems amiss here. We'll go to your doctor and get the more accepted test. And so when you're thinking about products and developing products, think about screening as a way to get there quickly and do some assessment as to the product has value or not. I think it's a good way to consider as a strategy.
Awesome. Dave, thank you for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it. Last chance for final parting words. Otherwise, it is a thank you and much appreciated.
Well, Steve, thank you for the opportunity to be with you on your podcast, and I just want to reinforce the value that I've seen in just our relationship, and partnerships like ours are another way to bring products to life. So thanks very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Yep. Likewise, Dave. Thanks. Appreciate it.